All right, let's get rolling here. Apologies for missing Tuesday's session. I've been moving, and someone thought it was a wise idea when they stopped their service to cut my internet cable. So that's been fun, and then I had some power outages to deal with. So apologies for not being here Tuesday. Um, let's dive into a couple things today. So what we're going to talk about, again, there's a lot of newer folks, especially on the public side, and some people that join the Discord. So for some of you that have been listening to this for a while, a lot of the beginning part of this is going to be very redundant, talking about the basics of Gamma and Charm. But then after that, I want to take a look at yesterday's positioning, because it was nuts. Absolute The amount of size being thrown around yesterday was absolutely insane. 30,000 lots being pumped on so many different strikes coming in and out. So I want to cover that and talk about it as well. So we're going to start with the basics, and then we will move on from there. Again, as I'm going through anything, feel free, hit any questions inside the chat here. I will take a look, and we will cover whatever you guys want to talk about. So let me just get this set up, and we'll get moving. All right. Okay. So obviously this is the look here at the options depth platform, right? So what this platform has is it has signed data from SIBO with regards to SPX and VIX. The newest update now that we just pushed out has 1 minute updates instead of 10, which was very cool to see, in particular from yesterday when you had a lot of that size moving around. The difference between a 10 minute and a 1 minute when it comes to maybe the gamma updates, probably a little less much of a difference. There's probably a little bit less. However, when you can start to see big size come in and adjust like we did yesterday, it makes a world of difference. So on a typical day like today, a little bit different as the maps are kind of changing. But yesterday, when a lot of size is being thrown out and being able to see it in a 1 minute interval has been pretty cool to see, and obviously super important. So first thing I want everyone to kind of understand first is, why do we care about this? Why do we care about this data? Why do we care about this information? And a lot of it has to do with, or all of it has to do with, dealer hedging, right? SPX is the main complex that a lot of big players and institutions use to adjust their positions. And because of the liquidity inside of the SPX complex, and market makers are constantly having to hedge their book to stay delta neutral against these particular positions that get put on. So the way that this works is, when someone puts on a position with size, or even us, it gets hedged instantly through the ES markets. And then after that, they adjust dynamically. So they put on that initial hedge, and then they adjust dynamically based off the positioning. That's what delta hedging is in a nutshell. They're trying to stay delta neutral. So if someone comes in and puts on a call, they'll have to do some type of hedging against that position. The math of all of it is not important for today. If you guys are interested in actually seeing what the math is, we can always get into that on a different session. But just understanding that that's what they're trying to do is where the importance comes into play. From the delta hedging perspective, after you move past that, there are two main cohorts that we focus on, and that is gamma and charm. Why do we care about gamma? Well, gamma is the rate of change in delta based off of spot price movement, right? So if we are in an area where there's a lot of gamma and spot prices adjusting, then dealers will have to constantly adjust their positions based off of what kind of gamma it is, which we'll talk about in a second. So that's why we care about it. We'll think of it more of like the speed of things, right? If price action starts moving and there's a lot of gamma, which is going to adjust that delta rapidly or not as rapidly, there is a certain delta hedging effect that has to come into play that you can potentially take advantage of. And I can show you that from yesterday with a good trade that we knocked down off of this and understand the basics a little bit better. And then on the other end of it, you have charm, which is how delta changes with respect to time. So think of it as your wind throughout the day, where you have suppressive and supportive charm. That's their passive dealer buying, because the delta of their book is going to change with respect as time goes on. Okay. All of this positioning that you see here, right? So this is in the green here. This is the call end. On the red side, this is puts from customers. And then obviously up here, I have market maker 0DT positioning. All of this is created by customers. The market maker's taking the other side, right? So if I were to go buy a long call, the dealer is going to be short that call. If I were to short a call, the dealer is going to be long that call, right? So it's an inverse relationship. If you want to understand it a little bit better, I like to show, in particular with gamma, I like to show a 3D image because it makes way more sense when you look at this in a 3D lens. The yellow here is spot for today. Blue is positive gamma. Red is negative gamma. Think of positive gamma as, again, as running up a hill. And in positive gamma, dealers trade against price, right? So as we go up, dealers are going to sell futures. And we're not talking about any of the other Greeks that comes into the delta hedging. We're just talking about gamma. So as we go into positive gamma peaks or positive gamma areas, dealers are going to hedge by selling ES futures against their book, which potentially slows down the speed. The exact opposite happens in negative gamma. In negative gamma, which you can see down here, it's like going down a hill or going into a valley. So dealers are going to hedge their book with price in a negative gamma environment. So they amplify the moves, increasing volatility, right? And you can notice what happened today, right? We have a nice little positive gamma area up here. Think of this as your big little hill or mountain. Price tried to go up, fades, right? It could not push past it. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't. It just means it's going to be slow. If price action wants to go higher, it will go higher, even if dealers are hedging against it. Buyers can always overwhelm what they're doing. So that's why gamma is reactive, right, to what's happening with price action. If we want to sell, it doesn't matter how much positive gamma we are, we're going to sell. We just know that sometimes the speed is going to have to decrease based off of what is happening, right? So today is a good example of that. Most of the action has been on the Q side. SPX hasn't done a whole lot. You can see this little hill or this mountaintop. Price is trying to go up it. It's very difficult. Remember, it's like pushing a ball up a hill. On the other end of this, if we were over this hill and into negative gamma, would be the opposite. It's like rolling a ball down a hill. That's the basis of gamma, right? The reason that we look at this through signed data and not the naive way is for the exact reason of understanding the delta hedging dynamic. Most people that talk about gamma are just looking at it through the lens of what we call naive GEX or naive gamma. And what that means is they make an assumption that all calls are sold, which makes the dealer long that gamma, and all puts are bought, which doesn't work, obviously, in the current world that we live in. So when you have naive gamma, you see people talk about those levels. Sure, there's a lot of volume or open interest sitting there, but you really don't know if there's going to be some type of dealer hedging dynamic put to it. Is there a lot of volume and people might be adjusting their positions? Sure. So you may get a reaction, but when it comes to dealer hedging, it might not be there. With our platform, with OD, you actually have the signed data. So we know for a fact who the players are. And we know with 99% accuracy from SIBO what side of the trade they're on in order to create highly visual and highly accurate maps for the day, right? So then what you do is you take this gamma image, which can look confusing in the 3D, and then you move it to a 2D image like you see here, which is right on the left side. So that big hill you saw is right here. That deep valley you saw is here in this red pocket. That's it. And the positions of customers, which make the inverse of which the market maker is going to be on, is what creates these pockets or creates this information, right? That's why we care, because you could take advantage of this type of information. On the other end, right, when we talked about Charm has the most value towards end of day. You could see that also in a 3D image, but it is your wind or your guardrails throughout the day, right? So if you look at today, for instance, we've been riding this one charm flip for a while till we had some type of catalyst to get below or a selling to get below. And then we've been kind of riding it back up. In anything that's in blue, because I have custom colors, anything that's blue is negative charm, which means dealers are losing delta with respect to time. So they have to buy futures. And anything in the red or pink is the opposite. It's positive charm. So dealers are gaining delta and they have to sell futures. You'll notice that these guardrails that we like to call them are charm flip levels, which are neutral. There's a lot of good opportunities to take trades off of. In particular, if you look here, right, I can zoom in a little bit, but this, depending on your time frame, is a nice little scalp. 73.68 hit the charm level. We bounced. 73.79 was the peak. For most people trading SPX options or futures, that's a good enough scalp or a good enough trade to be able to take some profit and do whatever. It's one of the favorite trades that we kind of look for. But you'll notice In these darker areas, we're just riding the charm flip line. Nothing has really happened today until we had some sort of catalyst, and now we've moved lower into more suppressive charm, which means passively dealers are going to be selling against their book. And then if you look at the gamma picture, we're slightly positive, right? 123 is the value. So we call that not neutral, but it is positive gamma, and it's just not as heavy. You'll notice even here on the right side now, we just had another charm fade, right? So those levels give you your guardrails until we get through them, and that it changes what the passive wins are going to be for the day. Charm, though, is super important end of day, and I can show you why inside of a 3D image. Like you saw with gamma on mountaintops, wait till you see what the charm values are end of day. They're nutty. And then we'll look at yesterday's information. I have this load up. The Martian, there's not music. You should be able to hear me. Can you guys all can hear me, right? I would assume so. Okay. So obviously this is your charm 3D map. Look at how flat it really is throughout the day. It's flat, right? Very flat surface. That's why we talk about it as a wind, right? It can be absorbed by buying or selling pressure, especially around the day, but it is that passive wind that you're going to have. But then look what happens end of day. These values get extreme, right? They get really, really large. And that's where there is a lot of selling or buying that has to happen passively in a very short period of time, right? So that's where it gets important. And a lot of the times, and I'll show you this from yesterday, they like to pin between large charm values, right? Right. So they want to pin in a neutral area. That happens quite often, right? And even better if you have a positive gamma area that also lines up with it, right? There's a lot of pinning effects. Remember, end of day, there's a lot of liquidity that comes into the market, right? So if the values are large enough to overwhelm a lot of that liquidity, then something will happen and we will get a reaction based off the charm values. There are other times where maybe people want to come in and buy, but dealers have to passively sell and we don't do anything, right? There's a lot of liquidity that comes into play, especially with mock. So you take some of this information to try to better understand, hey, is upside capped? Is there a pin level? Do I think we're going to go down? And so on and so forth. But that's where these values really skyrocket in value. So when you go and look back at this chart, you can notice what those values are and the size based on the intensity of the colors. And you'll notice on this box in the top corner, there's a number. All you want to do if you want to understand how much buying or selling they have to do is take that number and times it by 2. So in this instance, if we were up here at 317 and we were at 7460, the charm values here are 600, let's say. That means, and this is suppressive, right? Because the value of the charm here is positive. That means they'd have to sell 1200 ES contracts, right? That's a lot of size versus right now where we're sitting is 2. How easy is it for a dealer to be overwhelmed with 4 contracts? Shit, I trade 4 contracts, right? So that's kind of your difference here, right? You could see what those values are. It doesn't make it not important. It just means that's your passive win, and the size does matter in this sense, especially towards end of day, right? And how far that pocket pushes out, right? If it's really, really small end of day, then I'll probably put less importance on it. But if it's a massive pocket and we're kind of riding into it end of day, wow, that's a lot of wind that's going to push us potentially higher unless someone can really come in and absorb all that selling. So that's how you use that information. Does it push out for the last hour and a half, last hour? Can I take advantage? Or is there an area here where we might just ride and not do a whole lot and pin on these like neutral lines? Okay. Any questions so far on this before we dive into yesterday's movements? And I know for a lot of you that are in here, you guys know most of this because you've heard me talk about it for 6 months. But for those that are new, I wanted to be able to cover some of the basics. And again, there's no dumb questions. Right? You guys can ask anything. This is for you guys. I'll give you guys a second, and if not, we'll look at yesterday's movements. Okay, cool. All right. Yesterday was crazy. So I'm going to move over to yesterday's positioning because yesterday was awesome. Let's go back in time to when we were talking about this because pre-market, for those that trade with me, we were talking about the setup for the day and how if we caught a bid, there were some really clear levels and information to kind of play off of. So let me have this load up and you guys can see kind of like the value of this in action. Okay. All right, so this screenshot was taken at 9:02. This is before the open. I'm going to turn off OHLC and on these for now and ignore the price line, right? The price line that's from where we're at right now, ignore that. I just want you to pay attention to the gamma. So going into the day, we were going to open up on SPX. Where did we open? We were gapping up. So we opened at like what, 7,300, I think. What we had noticed is there is very specific types of setups that work well if price action wants to start playing in that direction. And one of them we call gamma magnet style trades. Okay. So in this particular instance, this is what the pre-map looks like. We are going to open up right around here at 7,300. Above us, we have a large positive gamma cluster caused by a bunch of customer short calls from 7,340 up to 7,350, creating this really deep positive gamma, right? And you can see it with the intensity of this blue. That's large. Typically, when we see something like this, and then you also see supportive charm where you have a wind at your back, there is a high probability that if we can catch some sort of bid, that we can push into this magnet. And it'll become, again, resistance for sure, but it gives us a clear direction and path that we can play off of. In this instance, for those that were trading with me, we were talking about pre-market. We want to get in a fly if we see us catching some sort of bid off the open and we continue with it. Because again, price action reigns supreme here because now we have a clear level to potentially go up to and pin to. And once we get up to this level, like 7,350 at this particular time, let me turn off my tick strike. It's going bonkers. Right? That's where you'd get heavy resistance. And why would we have gotten heavy resistance up in this area? Because of how much positive gamma there is. Remember, the larger these values are in positive gamma, the more dealers have to hedge against price, slowing down the price action, right? And quenching volatility. So with these particular trades, what I ended up doing was about 15 minutes, 20 minutes after the open, a little bit earlier than I usually do it, I bought a 73.35 by 73.50 by 73.65 fly. Right? With the idea being that if this holds this positioning, and that's the caveat here, and I'll show you what happened. But if we hold this, it's going to be very difficult to break that 73.50 level. So I want that to expire worthless, but I want the upside on the 73.35s. Because we're at 7,300 and the straddle was priced the way that it was priced, I had to come 15 or 20 wide out for me to feel like I was going to get paid. Now, we know what happened throughout the day. If I put candlesticks on, we pushed up to 73.65 and pinned, which was interesting. But this is why it's important to have like intraday updates, right? We saw this value, and if we just had this daily map, it worked, right? The trade worked. We grinded up a little bit faster than normal. So you probably, I think I paid $1.60. I got out at what, 3.2, I think, a new, and then $4 on the fly. If we would have had full decay on it, it would have been a lot higher of a payday, but we didn't because of what happened throughout the day. So I want to show you how the positions change and how that changes the thesis of the trade and changes the positioning from this gamma perspective, right? So watch what happens if I go a little bit further in time, just on this blue area that we're originally seeing. Right? This is now 11:22. It's gone. It doesn't exist no more. Right? Why? They closed it out. And when not only they closed it out, they rolled it up. So if I go back a little bit, let's see how far back I can get this. Okay, 938 would be good. That'll give us right off the open, and then I can jump forward in like a couple minute increments, right? But if you watch as we moved throughout the day, and we go to like 10:30, you'll notice the positioning start to close, right? So you see down here where we opened throughout the day, started day 1,800 on the 73.50s. We're now latest value 2,900, right? So then not only were they short this call strike, customers in general, they ended up being long it towards the end. So what happens with that? If the customers short that call and that creates all that positive gamma, and now they close out that position, and not only that, now people are kind of going long, chasing upside calls. That creates a small negative gamma bar. How does that affect the heat map? Well, you can see it up here, right? And we'll move these candles. Right. But when I start to move forward, you'll notice that 73.50 line, which we originally had, is now the bottom part of that gamma cluster. This image looks the same, but it actually rolled up 10 handles to 73.60. Now, if I go a little bit further in time, this is where we have an even bigger swap. Right. moved up even higher. Now we're at 73.75. That 73.60 position that we just talked about down here went from at a peak, I believe it was like 37K short calls, if I'm not mistaken. I think we got like 37K on this one. Right now it's off and they rolled it up to the 75s. Look at that. Now 30K there. So the positive gamma just kept rolling up higher and higher, and you could see it. So that changes things. What does that change? It just changes the hedging dynamic. Now, if they're rolling that off, now my idea with my fly is, okay, we could easily get over 73.50 because the gamma is no longer there, right? It got taken off, and we have this bid, this relentless bid in the underlying on price action. We just keep going higher. So I had to kind of adjust. And did we have like a lull throughout the session? Yeah. But again, there wasn't a ton of positive gamma here. But as we kept moving it higher, we kept kind of trying to push towards what we'll call those gamma magnets or those high gamma areas. But again, the key here is understanding that this doesn't always have to be the case, right? There's going to be times, and today, this morning is an example, where you have a similar setup, but it's so far away or it's not close enough that it might not be able to pan out the way that you're looking at it, right? That's why you want to let price action try to confirm direction. And now you have a clear target. Who cares if you're not in it right away? It doesn't matter. You're just trying to add probability and edge to your side. That's it, right? That's the whole point of this. So when I'm looking at this and I see it come off, I adjusted my position. I took my trade off. I made my profit. I'm good for the day. I'm going to watch and see what kind of else we do. But that's crazy to see how much size they had thrown around. I mean, just watching these bars over here, 30K. This one got on with the 37K, as you can see down here. And they're just throwing it in and out. Like you don't see that often. Like that doesn't happen very often. Yesterday was a very odd day to see that much size being thrown around in a way where they're putting it on and taking it off. Typically, these big strikes don't change much, right? People might tail them because they see the level and tail the trade or tail whatever the position is for selling. Because if you understand the gamma dynamics of this, right? Like I was saying, well, once I get up here, if I don't think we can get above it because there's so much gamma and I just don't think price action can push us higher, I could sell above it, right? If I wanted to start selling premium above it, I could. Like that's one way to play this. But if it keeps rolling off, that thesis goes out the window, which is why these updates are so important to see how it changes. There will be days, though, where it doesn't change, right? There'll be days where these bars just stay with so much size on them, and it gives you like those really good clean areas, and they're not adjusting. So that's the beauty of being able to see this information on the 1 minute time frame as they open and close positions, because it's crazy. And we didn't even touch on like the math of how much delta hedging has to go on and off when they start closing and opening positions, but we'll save that for another time. Right. So that's part of this. Now, if I go to today and then I want to show you the end of day with the charm stuff. But if I go to today, there was a very similar is probably the best way to put it setup this morning, but it was different. And I will show you why. So let's go back. Let's go off the open here. Okay, so this is off the open today. Let's move this. We opened up on SPX basically flat, a little bit higher. So what, 73, 72? So we'll call that right here. Okay. Now, what do you see in today's image this morning in comparison to yesterday's? Kind of a similar setup, right? A little bit, maybe not as deep, but you have a large positive gamma cluster up here at 74.20 through 74.50 that you could potentially target, and you have supportive charm, which are the two things we look for these potential gamma magnet style trades or these long trades. However, you have to, this is why I always preach the price action thing, and I dislike a lot of the times when people say, if we pass this, this has to happen. It's not how the shit works. Like, if at any point in time someone comes out and Trump comes out on Truth Social and says, I just, threw a missile somewhere, that's going to have a huge effect or catalyst on the market. And the gamma and the speed of things is what's going to determine how much extension we really get. But price action still reigns supreme. They're still going to dump or buy, right? So you had to wait for confirmation that we're going to catch a bid. And then you could have potentially said, all right, well, this is maybe growing in size throughout the day. We have supportive charm. I want to try to play a fly or trade up there. But today we didn't get it. We sat sideways in consolidation for a while. and it just never really materialized. So that's the importance of all of this more than anything else, and understanding, hey, this isn't going to tell you every single day what is going to happen, but it's going to increase your probability if you pay attention to a couple things. One, positive gamma clusters, negative gamma clusters, large gamma levels, charm flips, gamma flips, and then what regime you're in, right? It doesn't have it. That sounds like a lot, but that's very basic. You don't have to overcomplicate it, right? There's times where you'll see people like stare at a micro position like this with 1,000 lot and be like, well, if we get above this and there's negative gamma here, we have to go to that next bar. We don't have to do anything. And these positions are so small that, in my personal opinion, if you're trying to gain edge, I'm not going to just BS you guys and tell you this is going to guarantee that you got to do X, Y, and Z. That's not how we roll here, right? We're just trying to put probability on your side and have you understand the environment you're trading in. So these micro little positions, as we call them, I don't care. I want to see 1,500, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000. That's what makes it so crazy when you see a 30K lot and why it's so important to pay attention to, right? But that's, now you have two clear differences between what we saw yesterday and like the type of confirmation we needed where we caught a bid and we were able to push up higher. Then the gamma comes off, we kept rolling higher, versus today, we didn't catch it. So I had my eye on this potential position, but it was a little bit farther out, right? You're talking 60, 70 handles that we have to push higher again, right? To be able to get up to it, which is totally possible. But I wanted to wait to see if price action was going to confirm that we're going to move that way. You don't have to be in the position immediately, right? You can take some time. So that's just the fly style trade. The other trades, like we talked about, are playing off these flip levels or these gamma peaks, and you can scalp them or adjust them. It just depends on what your time frame is and what you're trying to do. Okay, so that's the gamma side of things, right? If anybody has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. That this is what we look for, right? We're looking for setups for the start of the day that potentially could be there. Then we're looking for what happens, right? What is going to happen throughout the day to adjust the profile? Is there something happening? And then if you're someone that likes the spreads, we're always looking for spreads. You could find positions, right? If you could look at this and say, I care about the gamma and the charm, but I want to see if someone's coming in like Condor Man and selling 10 wide, 5 wide spreads in size. You can see that positioning, right? So there's so many ways to take this data and kind of cut it up and understand it, to be able to use it for a way to gain a little bit of edge and probability in the way that you trade, especially on the indexes, right? So what I want to show what happened yesterday is the pin effect. So Anu can attest to this. But yesterday I said there was a clear, at the end of the day, there was a clear line in the sand at 65, and we pinned on it right at end of day. So let me show you a little bit about some of the charm dynamics that come into play, in particular yesterday, end of day. Okay, so we're going to focus on the right side here. Where this dashed line is where the snapshot was taken. All right, so we're looking at what, 114. And go a little bit further in time. I think I called it out. Yeah, we're recording it, Martian. I will post this one for you guys inside of the recorded sessions. But okay, I think it was around this time that I made mention of it to everyone for end of day. Maybe a little bit later, but doesn't matter for example purposes. So what I was looking at on this was, okay, I see here that we're kind of grinding higher. We like these charm flip lines, right? There's a lot of value in understanding where they are. So when I'm staring at this and I'm looking at the end of day here, I noticed a couple things. Right? The values above 73.65 for charm in this area, this big blue area, these are very, very large numbers for charm, right? 600, 700, 1,000, right? Big numbers. On the other side of it, though, we had some decent, the other end of it, right? Some selling levels here. So what I had said was, okay, well, you clearly have some sort of balance point here at 73.65. You could say or make the assumption strong above, weak below, right? Like this is where we're going to kind of hit our cap for now, or hit our resistance level, because the values are so large on either side that we have to wait to see if we're going to catch a bid to push into this, and that's going to give us a lift. Or on the other side, we're going to get into these positive charm values where we're going to have to get some selling pressure. And where did we end up yesterday on this? We closed at 65 on the number, right? Directly on top of it. 0.43. So they like to pin price in between larger charm nodes, right? Larger charm values. They love to kind of do that on the 65. All right, and this is now pushing past the close. So that's something to pay attention to whenever you're kind of looking at it. And these values change, right? Like as you can see, as positions adjusted or changed, right? This big charm value started to go away as time went on, right? But that's where we talk about like the potential pinning effect and how the positions kind of work is they like to look for those levels, even better if it's paired with a large, positive gamma area. Okay. So that's what we're looking for. If you guys have any questions, feel free now to ask. We can cover whatever you guys want. It's an open session now for you guys. Any questions? And again, there's no dumb questions. You guys can ask me what gamma is for all I care. Totally fine. We will cover everything that you guys are interested in. See a couple of you typing, so I'll let you guys type it out. Yeah. So okay. So I think you're talking about the OD score new, right? And when we were talking about the Vanna environment change. Okay. So we didn't cover Vanna in this session, but since there's a question on it, I'll bring it up. Let me go to a dashboard here. Let me create a Vanna map. So there's a couple ways that we show data. We have two different ways. One is absolute values, and one is an OD score. For Vanna, we use OD score, right? For gamma and all of that, you can set it to OD score, or you can set it to absolute values. I use absolute values, but all the OD score is for whatever it is, whether it's charm, gamma, Vanna, is it's looking at a 90-day look back window. Okay. And it's taking whatever the highest level was, the lowest level was, and making it into a percentile basis. So when I look at the Vanna level right now, which is an environment thing, and I see that we're in the 94th, 94.2, that means I'm in a negative Vanna environment. We are in the 94th percentile of negative Vanna right now. Right. And the same thing happens when you look at it on gamma. So, like, I don't want to ruin my chart, but if I come to gamma, there's a reason that I don't use it and I can show you guys. But some people like it this way. It's just a preference thing. Actually, I don't think I can show it in here. I think I got to change it to market maker exposure. Yeah. So if I come in here and I change the scale to OD score versus absolute and I apply it, look what happens to the map. Right. So you'll see a lot of people use it this way, right? There's a lot of other people that show it this way. The reason why I don't personally use it is not because there's not value. It's more so I don't over analyze or over visualize how much gamma is really there, right? So if you look at, like, let's say we're in a lower gamma environment for like 2.5 months, and then all of a sudden we get into a lot of gammas being built up in certain places. This map, because it's looking at 90-day look back window, is going to have deep, intense colors, right? Super deep and intense. I don't want that. I want to know when we're in a light neutral area and there is something massive above. So like if we use this and I go back to yesterday, click the wrong button. Let's go back to yesterday. Let's go at 9:30. Oh, actually, I don't even need to. Let's just move back. Look at this intensity off the open, right? How can I tell off of this map right here where I want to potentially go or pin, right? Where that level is? You can't, right? So again, it's just there's ways to cut the data. There's nothing wrong with this particular view, but I prefer it to look like this because I want to know where there is a clear overhead position, right? Like now I know we're much more neutral down here. I have a clear target because that's so big and deep, right? So that's what the beauty and importance of this is. From a Vanna perspective, the only thing we have right now is the OD score. That will change. I believe Yusuf's working on getting raw absolute values in there. but it's not I don't think it's super high on the priority list. And then you could do the same thing, obviously, if you want on charm, right? So that's the reason why. And you obviously have seen us talk about it, like this flip on the Vanna environment from positive to negative, and that effect on IV and how it has its reflex on the market. You've noticed it now, right? There's days where the VIX is starting to come off, and that's your proxy that you can use for IV, and there's not a lot of reflexivity into the market, right? Or it changes how things have to work, how the dealer delta hedging works with all of this, where it might cushion or it might give you more resistance as we kind of adjust with IV, right? Versus the more chaotic environment that we're in with Vanna was when we were in a positive Vanna environment with negative gamma and negative charm, right? But I mean, for most of people that are new to this, don't focus on Vanna. It does not matter for most of you that are just starting out. This is getting a little bit more into the weeds. There is value in having this information to understand the relationship to IV and delta hedging that can help you understand or get a better understanding of certain levels and areas that are important based off the Vanna environment, or what has to happen if we sink or push into certain levels and areas with respect to, like, we'll call vol sellers or vol buyers. But that's just an environment thing. Like, we're talking about the environment you're in. Okay. Yeah. Can you briefly summarize once more about what happens, whether there's resistance or support at the peak and trough lines? Yeah, I won't cover the trough lines. The trough lines I wouldn't use, me personally, as support and resistance. There are people that do. Think about, if you look at this map, right? The trough lines come out of large negative gamma nodes, and the peak lines come out of the positive gamma nodes. Trough lines have value in them in a different way when it comes to, like, the negative gamma aspect of it. But I prefer to focus on a little bit less, right? So I prefer gamma peaks and gamma flips. Um, the I will give you my answer to this, not that like a scientific OD answer, is in the way that I've always rationalized it in my head is, if you think about it as a market maker, right? What's going to be a neutral position where you don't have to do a whole lot, right? Neutral gamma, neutral charm are areas that there's not a lot of more adjusting that has to be done. That's not a scientific answer. It's just how I visualize it in my own head, right? To try to better understand it. The easiest way, really, more is just like, if you look at this long enough, you'll notice there tends to be a lot of support and resistance at all of these flip lines, whether it's charm, whether it's gamma. And then obviously the gamma peaks one makes the most sense or the easiest to understand, because the peak is coming from a large gamma cluster, right? Or a large positive gamma node, as we call it, a certain strike, like the 50s or 60s here that peaks out. That one's easier to understand. But if you're looking for like a scientific math answer as to why, I don't have a good one for you. I can ask what Ilias and Yusuf would usually say, but from a trader's perspective, for me, it's just more of, well, if they like to stay in neutral environments, right? Or they want to stay as neutral as possible where their book doesn't do a whole lot. Why wouldn't you want to be in there if you're a market maker? That's just the trader answer, though. Right? The peak and the peak positive is the easiest one. The others are, there's math behind them and how the lines are calculated, and there's just a lot of, I've seen it so much over the last 2 years where there's just so much support or resistance at gamma flip lines and charm flip lines. I didn't believe the charm flip one when I first started using the platform before I met the guys, and then I started to realize the reaction at it, and I was like, damn, it's pretty impressive over time how until we flip below them or go above them. It's crazy. Again, it's just like anything else. You talking about arbitrary or subjective lines, I guess, in the sand that people like to say, oh, like, this is my level. Well, these are just your levels. There's a lot of reaction at them. Yeah, charm flip's great. Gamma flip does the same thing though. There are bounces or changes on the gamma flip lines as well. It's just when you're in a more stable environment, there's less that pokes out. It's like, this is the kind of the importance of understanding the regime versus how zero DTEs change the gamma heat maps. So this is the part that I think was really difficult for a lot of people to comprehend when we first started talking about this was you'll have everyone on, Fin Twitter being like, "Oh, we're in positive gamma environment." And then I would come in and say, "Hey, we're in negative gamma here." And people would be like, "There's no way that we're in negative gamma." And I'd be like, "There is a way. You just got to understand the difference between regime and zero DTE positioning, right?" So remember what I said at the beginning, zero DTEs have the highest concentration to gamma. Why? Because gamma is the largest at the money, closest to expiration. So what is the closest expiration? A zero DT. And that gamma changes from 1 hour to 5 hours to 6 hours from zero DT. So you have to look at it from this perspective of if the environment, and you don't have any zero DT positionings on, you just take those off and you just look at everything else, all the rest of them, what all those positionings will dictate, like what environment that people, when they talk about that you're in, positive or negative. Once the environment is established, and then you add in zero DTs or even one DTs, two DTs, right? I'm just trying to keep it simple. That will now, if you have enough size in those zero DTs, they will push out into that regime that we're talking about and create pockets of gamma, right? So we saw that yesterday as time went on. There was a negative gamma pocket that started to develop, right? In these certain areas. I think it was a little bit later on. This one pushed out a little bit further. But these pockets, as positioning adjusts, push out, right? Like positive gamma. Well, now we have a large negative gamma strike pushing out onto the profile, right? These flip lines for support and resistance, because they change so much based off of zero DT positioning, I put a little less weight into. The ones that provide the most value for me from a gamma flip trade is when you see them like we saw above, where it's a hard, fast line across like this, right? Like this isn't just a pocket peeking out. This is above. Structurally, it's different. Above this, there is a flip to negative gamma, and the positive gamma pockets start to peak out. Versus on this side, this is positive gamma regime where negative pockets peak out. The flip lines like that throughout the day, or if you have multiple pockets throughout the day because the sizing is large enough, those are the ones I give the most value to for the exact same reason as to why this positive gamma came off, right? Think about it. If you can create a pocket by putting on zero DT positions and then you take that position off, that gamma flip line or gamma level that you just had that you were trading off of ceased to exist because the positioning just changed, right? So that's why I prefer, and the charm does the same thing. It just doesn't change as much. So I like obviously the charm flip trades a lot, especially when it's a larger range. And then obviously, the gamma flip side when they push out and they're a little bit larger in size versus the smaller ones, right? The smaller ones, all I'm taking out of them is at what point do we potentially move into a negative gamma pocket or positive gamma pocket where there might be a little bit of a difference in speed. Hopefully that makes sense. Cool. Cool. For those that are new, when you guys join these live sessions, I do them every Tuesday and Thursday. If you guys are interested in trying out the Options Depth platform, we have a promotion going on. Use code LIVE10 for those that are coming in on Twitter. It'll be in the description kind of below. You get 10% off to kind of try it out with the 1-minute updates that we have. There's also, I think, a giveaway or promotion going on. If you look at the Twitter page here, if you guys are interested in taking advantage of that. But these are free for everybody, right? Tuesdays and Thursdays, I try to do them. We talk about a lot of the basics. Some of it'll be a little redundant, but there will be times it'll just be straight up Q&A, or we'll get into some more kind of advanced topics depending on what people want, right? So if you guys have questions about any of this and you want to learn more, I will drill it into your head what gamma and charm is to the point where you're probably never going to be able to forget it, even if you wanted to, which is kind of the point. And then as you start to understand it better, you'll get to a point in place where all of this will become pretty easy for you to visualize, see, and understand, and be able to make trade ideas or theses off of it, or how to add it to your own trading that you guys do, and better understand like the regimes you're trading in, where are the inflection points of the market, and how you guys can, give yourself just a little bit more edge in how you're trading, especially on, on index options and futures. So, Trev, yes, I can. I will show you where it is. Keep in mind, the positioning will probably change, but I can give you a quick little peek at where we're at on the charm side of things for potential pin trades for today. Yeah, this will change. I can guarantee you, because these values aren't large, as positioning changes throughout the day, all of this is going to change. So I'd look for pins. And again, price has to get there first, but I'd be looking at 7320, 7300. If we go up, all bets are off until end of day when you can actually see what the values are. But because these values are so small until end of day, that means when positioning changes, these charm values here are going to change and the size of them are going to change versus when you get these large ones, like you see here above 7,400 and up above here at 70, 470, these big pockets, these become very good pin levels because both sides have such large values. So this one will probably be a little bit more of a crapshoot until end of day and how the maps kind of change. But anyways, thank you guys for joining. We'll be back again on Tuesday. And appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them then. And then I will post this session in the recorded sessions here in Discord. Thanks, guys.